Dr. Ezekiel Mutua is the current CEO of the Music Copyright Society of Kenya. He is a former CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board, and the last time he was here, he was KFCB. Welcome, Dr.
Thank you, Eric. City,
how are you, sir?
Good to see all of you.
No, good to see you,
It's been
sir.
a while.
Yeah, it's been a while, sir. But it's nice to see you.
I'm happy that I found relevance finally.
You've always had relevance.
Thank you.
Always.
But I've not been here for quite some time.
Well,
I thought it's because I lost relevance.
let's give you a perspective.
Yeah.
Okay? You are a man who understands the Bible. When Jesus turned water into wine, was it at the beginning of the feast or was it at the end of the feast? Okay.
In this country,
I think
the moment you become aliyekuwa, the moment you start being addressed as former this, former that,
Story question.
your goose is cooked.
It gets worse when they start saying
People
one
know
time.
you.
One time.
So like you never existed. Aliyekuwa.
Mheshimiwa, you are relevant. And
Thank
I'm
you.
calling you Mheshimiwa knowing full well you're not a member of parliament, lakini when you unaheshimiwa.
Asante
Yes.
City.
Yes.
Hey, getting that from an elder.
Yes.
Academia. That is quite something. You've made my morning.
Asante sana. Yes.
How is my lady from Nigeria?
She's very fine, thank you.
You're okay? You can pass through the customs. And,
Well, they haven't kicked me out. They haven't kicked me out yet.
you're Kenyan. Very good.
She's home.
Kabisa.
Dr. Mutua, now, this matter of, this church.
The Shakahola massacre.
Yeah.
Because it is a massacre.
Because this is what it is.
Yeah.
When the story started coming out a couple of days ago, in terms of, some 2 children have been found having starved to death and their mother had locked them in a room because she's following what has been preached by this man. And then the story started coming out of other people. You're among the people who took to Twitter and said, when I was at KFCB, we had dealt with this particular preacher.
Yes.
And you said that he used to run a TV station and you looked at the content of that TV station and many other things, and you said there's an issue here. Give us that background.
This story started, or interaction with Mackenzie and the Good News International Church, started in 2018 when we flagged some content from his TV that was horrifying. Teachings that were radicalizing the faithful, teachings that bordered on terrorism, really, and were contradicting government policy, contradicting the law, the constitution, teachings that taught people not to go to school, not to take medicine when they're unwell or to go to hospital. And our role as a regulator was to ensure that what people consume, we vet the suitability. And so if you are now communicating that to the public through a national frequency given to you, there's a responsibility. So we flagged out that. But when we realized that the teachings were dangerous and could lead to, people hurting themselves, whether taking their lives or failing to eat or not going to school or not obeying government policy, we thought we needed to involve the investigative agencies to look into the matter. So we enlisted the support of the anti-terror unit and the DCI in Malindi. At that time, Pastor Mackenzie was based in Malindi, and the church was growing. And we confiscated. We rented the studios in the church, confiscated the cameras, the equipment, the broadcast equipment, and subjected them to examination and classification as per the KFCB regulations and mandate. Some of the classifiable elements that we used to look at in our work for vetting suitability or determining the age appropriateness of our program were things like horror, occultism, nudity, obscenity, vulgarity, profanity, drugs, and so on. And so occultism came into play. And remember, we were very scientific in the manner in which we did it, the frequency and the intensity of these classifiable elements. So if somebody is teaching frequently and in a manner likely to radicalize, and it's frequent, it is intense, it is explosive, we subjected to the government agencies that could investigate and find out, is there something more to it? Because our role was limited to the regulation of the broadcast content. But could there be people who are dying out of this? Could there be people who have left school? And how does this argue with development and government policy? This is a Kenyan preacher, a televangelist, operating on using a national frequency. And remember, national frequency is not personal. Frequencies are not personal resources. These are national resources given to you in custody, to keep in custody for the public. So we held him accountable.
Okay,
we demanded for accountability. We eventually took him to court. But he was given a part and released with 10,000 bond. Yeah.
Can I take a few steps back?
Yes.
Based on what you've said, and this was years ago. How many years are we talking about now?
This is about 6 years.
6 years ago, 2018.
Yes.
Isn't it? So at that time, he was already, showing some signs.
Absolutely.
There were some signs, which clearly, and they were in the open. They were public.
Yes.
These are not the buried bodies that we're talking about today.
No, that time it was clear. This is a radicalization program.
And you pointed this out.
Yes.
And you asked the help of the investigative authorities.
Including the anti-terror police unit.
And they knew. Did they also confirm that there was some worrisome behavior here?
Yes. In fact, we got a lot of cooperation, support. I remember a DCI officer who would even fly to Nairobi to my office when I couldn't go to Malindi, because I had assigned this to our regional, our coast region manager, a guy called Bonvenja Kioko, who is very learned and very thorough. He's a journalist, so he investigated and he worked very well with the media. So we also involved the media, by the way. These are stories that were covered, and we did it openly in a very transparent manner. What made me send the tweet that I did is the sheer lack of shame on part of government officials who looked the other way. It's a sheer lack of shame on the judiciary that presented with incontrovertible evidence that this is murder, that this is dangerous, just gave a fine of 10,000 and released this guy, and he continued. We arrested him again, and we have been in court with that guy. I'm told that yesterday I contacted KFCB, and I'm told the matter is still in court. KFCB never relented. But other people looked the other way. Government officials were either duped, they connived, or they were compromised.
Which government officials, though?
It's a part of the ecosystem.
Because you've just said you were a government official,
yes.
KFCB.
Yeah.
Anti-terror police was government. DCI was government.
Yeah.
The prosecutor
Judiciary
was government. All those took them to the judiciary. He was charged based on what was presented before the judicial officer. The person was released as required by law, as expected. He was released on a cash bail. As the case progresses, who are you saying dropped the ball?
Eric, there is no way that this case could have led to the number of deaths that we are seeing without the government knowing. There are assistant chiefs, there are chiefs, there is community policing, there are nyumba kumi. There is no way a massacre of this magnitude, deaths of this kind, where people are indoctrinated and they are taken to the forest. There are leaders there. There are government structures there. And I refuse to believe that nobody knew. I have said our role was limited to regulating the broadcast content going to the public. But all that other infrastructure, including the politicians and the leadership of the county, somebody somewhere slept on the job.
But you raised the flag and you said, look, there's something going on here. Now, this court case...
And you see, if I can just to add on what you're saying, I during my time at KFCB, we took a very different approach to government function duties. Not just rating and classifying films, because that's a primary mandate and very simple. To rate GE, PG, the easiest of job. We decided to raise awareness, to create awareness, to work with the people, and to involve the other agencies. Okay. And so we worked with a lot of people, Eric. That's why I was saying somebody dropped the ball deliberately. I'm sure in the fullness of time, when this matter is investigated, we'll get to know. And it's horrifying. It is not something that we can just assume it was okay. And this guy was not operating from the outer space. Like I've said, this county government, there are administrative structures. Somebody somewhere should have known. Okay. How I wish my role extended beyond just regulating the films.
Okay.
Honestly.
Sure.
I wish I saved one life.
So moving to... again, you did raise the flag, and here you are saying that you hoped that the role would have expanded to something else. So those then who serve in a prosecutorial position then took up the case and charged him in court. I'm curious as to, and need to maybe look at the details, what were the charges for which then he was granted this 10,000 shillings bail? And what are the charges today for which this case is still in court?
I think there are quite a number of things that we need to point out. Some of it just sheer inefficiency on the part of the prosecutorial process. And that speaks about the need for probably agencies like Kenya Film Classification Board to have their own prosecutorial powers and their own prosecutors and investigative agencies or support to be able to prosecute the matter. Because it's not just in the case of Mackenzie. There are quite a number of cases where we felt we could have gone further and do a better job. There was ignorance. You'd encounter ignorance from the public itself, from government officials, from the police. You would encounter ignorance of the law and the understanding of this occultism and how it operates, even from the judiciary. And it's not just in the case of Mackenzie, like I've said, even right now where I am in matters of copyright. You go to a judge who is wondering, did somebody steal your CD? So what is this? That they banned you. What is this banning? So you still have your original. What is the issue? And they get away with this, and you find a judge dismissing. Where I am right now, I'm dealing with that magnitude of ignorance, where like an institution like that, which is a private company, but you cannot see police don't understand their role, the judiciary doesn't understand their role, and you wonder why. Is it that people are deliberately looking the other way? Is it that we fail to take our job seriously and invest in education to understand the spheres of influence that we have so that we can do a better job? And I tend to think it is laziness, lack of imagination and creativity in the execution of our duties as government officials.
What among all those things that Pastor Mackenzie was preaching, what alarmed you about him? Why did you pick on this particular channel that is preaching this and not all these other many channels that have preachers on?
The one on education and telling people not to go to the hospital was alarming, because there were clear cases of people who can see this emaciated, this could die. And he's preaching to them, and you can see somehow they seem to have been hypnotized into believing that this is their Messiah, and was concentrating on heresy about the end time and Jesus coming soon. And these people, and you remember the issues of marginalization and poverty in the coast, and the hopelessness among some of the people, and the general breakdown of the moral fiber in the country. It is very easy for some of these conmen and the quacks, charlatans in the religious sector, who pray and take advantage of the poverty and the vulnerability and gullibility of Kenyans, particularly when it comes to matters of faith. And remember, some of those communities are very superstitious. So they deal with the witchcraft and other challenges. And so when the chips are down and things are not working, you have gone to school, you have a degree, nothing is working for you, and you think you are bewitched. It's very easy for someone like that to take advantage. So it's not just these agencies of the government to blame. There is a failure of leadership in so many levels that has led to this situation where people are hopeless and they can be taken advantage of.
So your entry was the occultism.
It was occultism, because it is part of the classifiable elements that we look at.
What is occultism? How is it defined in law?
It is, for example, if you profess miracles and you claim that you have healed somebody, a cripple,
right?
If that miracle cannot pass muster in terms of science and medical evidence, we would question it. Okay. Because why don't you go to Kenyatta National Hospital and heal the people who are sick and die?
Sure.
If you are raising the dead, why don't you go to the mortuary? So some of these things were like, keep them in the church. If people come to your church and believe that, it's okay. But if you want to bring them to the public through your broadcast, we have a role. Because what we are saying is, if you don't self-regulate, you're inviting government regulation.
So how many others did you, in your time as KFCB, how many others did you?
I had about 7, by the way. And it was even a challenge for me because as a born-again Christian, I was even accused of trying to regulate the church. I remember that time myself and Professor Githu Muingai were actually targeted. It was like there's a sense in which matters of faith and the church should be left alone. So, but I was like, this is a new phenomena of digital TV, and there were so many of them that were coming up that were not falling within the mainstream regulation by even the Media Council, because they are operating on the digital space, and some of them were new. We didn't know there was some dealing with science, others dealing with agriculture, and so there was no sufficient structures to regulate them. So what alarmed me was some of these miracles, because you see people rolling on the floor, others being slapped very hard, others being drinking stuff that you could say this is concoction, it's poisonous, and I'm like, why? What led into this? However, if it is their faith, it's okay. But you want to bring it to the masses as the way of life.
So the problem is when it comes for you. The problem is when it comes to broadcasting it.
Yes. That was my mandate. Obviously, I had bigger problems, and I would have gone further. But I was restricted to my mandate. I raised it with the other government agencies, and we raised awareness.
Okay.
We worked with parents. We worked with the schools. We even took over the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival, because some of these things were also nuances were being also passed through the school system. Somebody acting as kit. And it looks okay, but you can see they're passing a message that is misleading. And ours was to deal with the misleading information passed to the public.
Dr. Mutua, did you raise issue with even the mainstream media, who would host a preacher who do the same things?
Absolutely. Not only
running a crusade.
I took it upon myself even to attend some of those crusades. I have attended even Prophet Owol's crusade, and I've never seen masses like those. I took it upon myself to interact with them and to try, as a government official, to understand where you're coming from. Why are all these people here washing streets and believing in you? And then I try to interact. Like I've told you, I'm a Christian, and I didn't want to divorce the elements of faith from my work. I wanted to understand where is the nexus. So I got involved, and that's why I'm telling you, we worked with the churches, we worked with the schools, we worked with other government agencies, and we tried to invest. We put a lot of money in the Kenya National Drama and Film Festival because we realized it's a systemic societal problem. It is not just something that you pick when you're grown up. It is indoctrination from the childhood, from ECD, and we decided to interact with them at that level. And the program was themed identifying and nurturing talent while promoting moral responsibility. The whole idea was to educate the trainers of trainers, directors of films, and the actors to understand the responsibility they have and the power of content in shaping societal values. And I think we did a good job of it. We may not have succeeded, but we tried during my time, and I can see KFCB still doing it. I'm very pleased with what they are doing. But I think they need to be given more money for sensitization, because if you just stick to the area of rating and classifying films, that is so simplistic. In fact, the question I kept asking, did you ever imagine, as you know, and involve academia and other people and the psychologists, to ask yourself, why do you exist as KFCB? Why do you rate and classify films? And we would sit in a boardroom, and we came up with the reasoning, the objectivity, the objective for it, which is to ensure to rate and classify broadcast content and films to ensure that they conform to the Kenyan Constitution, Kenyan culture, values, and national aspirations. Those were things that came out of a boardroom discussions. Because it's like you are given a role to manufacture guns, and you're just manufacturing guns, and you don't ask yourself, what for? Is there war? Why are we manufacturing guns? And this is how governments operate, by the way. I can tell you the level of lack of imagination, the sheer lack of shame in some government offices should really annoy you.
Let's take a break on this note. 24 minutes to 9. Dr. Ezekiel Mutua is the current CEO of the Music Corporate Society of Kenya. He is a former CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. He is now giving us his context on how many times he dealt with Pastor Paul Mackenzie. He tells us from 2018, he started engaging with the issue of Pastor Paul Mackenzie and the Good News International Church, and going to the extent of actually making sure that TV that he was operating then is pulled off here. So we'll continue this conversation shortly.
This is The Situation Room the only way to start your day.
The headline in the Standard, Cult Massacre. It's basically looking at, the story of what's unfolding at Shakahola Forest in Kilifi County. More than 70 bodies of cult victims dug up in graves on the land said to belong to this Pastor Paul Mackenzie. We have in the studio this morning Dr. Ezekiel Mutua. He is a former CEO of the Kenya Film Classification Board. At that point, he dealt with this particular church and he raised concerns about this church. And Dr. you're saying many people dropped the ball. If you look at what happened then and what has happened now, it's about very many people dropping the ball. City, do you agree?
The balls were dropped. But the question I want to ask is at what point? Because the individuals that we have encountered in this saga all seem to subscribe to the Christian faith or did at some point or the other. Now, one of the things that guarantees that somebody can be misled is if they're ill-informed or they believe in something which is incomplete. Now, many people who subscribe to the Christian faith, oddly enough, subscribe to the pastor, not to the word of God. So when the pastor becomes the man of God, then you already have a problem. Because that is the person, what the person says is what you believe. Now, dropping the ball, when you look at how it is, churches sprout up and people say it is a good thing, people believe there's faith. Now, when do you raise the alarm? Forget the red flag. When do you say things are going wrong? We have churches that advertise almost on a weekly basis. Come at 10:30 for your miracle. Really? So if I come at 10:30, I'll get my miracle.
And if you're late?
If you're late, sorry. You come next week at 10:30 so that your miracle can arrive. So what I'm trying to say is, very many churches that come up have messages that are alluring, but they're misleading. So when should the alarm be raised? At the point where you see this being stated, at the point where clearly somebody is on TV every day and it is in the public and that person is not preaching anything that is related to the Bible at all. They're just telling you stories about themselves. Throw in a few Bible verses here and continue. And there are people in those churches. Now, my question is, the discussion around this has been, regulate. Everybody has had something to say on this matter. So if you regulate, what then do you do? Before you came in, Dr. we had discussed this earlier and I said, as far as I'm concerned, those who subscribe to the Christian faith and those who have leadership and who say they have a calling, this problem falls squarely on them. Me, I'm not even thinking of government agencies because these cults, these breakaway faiths that we what is it that leads to them? There are many breakaway churches that are sensible, sane. There's nothing you can say is untoward.
City, let me cut you short. In matters of faith,
yes,
and media, particularly media, I advocate for self-regulation. But where self-regulation fails, the government must come in. Failure to self-regulate, to set your own structures, to have minimum standards, a code of ethics that you subscribe to, and that all of us agree. Because if you call yourself a profession or a sector, then there must be some minimum standards. You cannot have any sector that is unregulated.
Does the Christian church have such a setup?
There should be a setup because they are registered, first of all, for you to be called a church.
Let me ask the question again.
Yeah.
Does the Christian church have such a setup? You're a Christian.
You would want to imagine that a National Council of Churches, for instance, would have some role to play. The Evangelical Alliance, and there are so many other denominational setups, actually with even umbrella national bodies. And I see this when they're planning meetings that all these people come together. When I was at Kenya Film Classification Board, we reached out to all of them. We were working with the archbishops, we were working with the leaders of these churches, and we brought these matters to their attention. Let me tell you, City, why I think regulation, where self-regulation fails, the government must come in. In fact, let me rephrase that. Even where there's self-regulation, the government still has the responsibility, the primary responsibility to protect lives, to protect property, and to protect morals and cultures of their people. In a situation like the case of Mackenzie, the numbers grew as everybody watched. To get to a point where we have 6,000 members in a godforsaken, now, let me withdraw that.
In a remote part of the
in
country.
a remote part of the country.
Yes.
Seriously, those are serious numbers, 6,000. And they kept growing. In cases where now a government agency like AFCB flags out some of this content and does its own investigation and combines a report and shuts down a station, somebody should have been alarmed. Either an assistant chief, a chief. People were watching. And like I told you, where the government must come in, even that sheer number, 6,000, it can be a target for terrorism. Those are many people. In fact, right now, as we speak, City, we are staring at a calamity and tragedy of monumental proportions, probably bigger than the Westgate. Remember yesterday, about 29 bodies, was it 26?
The total number now is 73.
Were discovered, and the search goes on.
Yes.
That yesterday was day 4.
Yep.
This man owns an 800-acre piece of land. He moved into that forest. Nobody bothered to check what was going on. And you can imagine indoctrination and radicalization that has taken 20 years, church that has grown to 6,000 people. And now those people at some point when he shut the TV and the church and moved to the forest, he told them Jesus is coming. And so let us move there. Given the level of occultism and the level of misleading information and the way these guys seem to have believed in him, we could be staring at a calamity that has never been seen. And that's the question I was asking. Where was the government? You mean nobody was monitoring that? Because I said we were restricted to regulating the broadcast content.
Yeah.
But there are other agencies.
Isn't this the problem?
City, church.
I'm not moving away from
which
this, by
church?
the way,
Which is the church City? What are you talking
When I'm
about?
Many
talking
could
about the
argue-
church is
yeah,
the body
the-
of Christians.
Right.
Yes.
Who form all these big names that you think of any huge
You're talking
Christian
about the
organization.
Therein lies
Pastor
the problem.
Mackenzie's rival churches.
No, it's
I'm
talking
talk-
about the body of
I'm
Christ
talking
in
about- yes,
general,
I am talking
in
about
terms
them
of the
in-
responsibility of ensuring some standards and safety of the operations. And I agree with you. However, when the church moved from the mainstream, we used to have Catholics, the Presbyterians, the Methodists, and so on.
They're
There
called
was
Protestant-
torture.
they're called Protestants.
Now, the Protestants, now we moved into an area where you would say this is industry, this is individual business.
Yes.
And when it got there, somebody should have been alarmed.
I know the question that
Who
you're asking.
holds
Yeah,
the
you keep
responsibility?
asking the question that what happened? What did government do? And I think this is the conundrum that we are in right now.
Exactly.
Because what did the government do? And it doesn't matter who you are. That when you start to tread on the moral,
Yes.
when you start to tread on the religious and the things that affect you, your personality or your
Yes.
character as opposed to
Yes.
the physiological,
Yeah.
then everybody, we kind of want to not, and we talked about this yesterday, for fear of calling out any kind of self-damnation, you're not going to want to tread on, okay, it's
On
your
another
religion.
somebody's church.
It's your religion,
Exactly.
and so we're not really going to
Yeah,
get
it's
it. So
your
when
faith,
you,
and
so
these
when you
guys are
ask
adults.
about, it's the thing that is a peril to the individual when they think there are two people you will not question: your priest and your doctor. So if your priest comes and tells you this is where we're going to go, more than likely you're going to go that way. For the individual as well as these agencies that you're asking about, for something else, they would have jumped on it. If there are mass protests in the streets today, police are everywhere saying, you guys, get to it, get inside.
Yeah.
But here we are. It's a mass killing. It's mass death.
Yeah.
It's no different.
And it not just
but there's
happen one day.
silence because
over
of this
time.
very same thing.
Yeah.
And it's over time.
And that's why I'm saying the primary responsibility lies with the government. And City, I wanted to correct something because the unfortunate thing about stories like what Mackenzie has done and the massacre in Kilifi tend to demonize and generalize the entire church and make it look like the church is, every church is rotten, every pastor is bad. Let me tell you, I'm a product of the church, and I know good pastors. I know very professional pastors who care about people, who help people, who have started schools, who deal with the human person wholesomely, and who are very useful in society. And in fact, some of the churches, I believe, do the work of government and should even be supported. So let us not use this one instance, appalling as it is, to demonize the entire church.
Actually,
my take to
not-
what you are saying,
it's not
City,
demonizing.
it's about where when you know why I'm coming into it. You talked where is the church, and you're asking a fundamental question.
And I'm not moving from it.
And I wanted you to explain deeply what do you understand by that?
Yes.
Which is the church?
You see, let me put it simply. We talk about self-regulation. We talk about government as though the government is an entity removed from the rest of us. We are the government. We give relevance to the government. When people talk about government, they often refer to government officials, especially the high-ranking ones who say serikali. But many of these serikali types are also Christians or they're religious people.
CT, you're being idealistic.
I am.
It's not an idea.
I'm being philosophical.
Okay.
Now let me leave philosophy and bring it to everyday life.
Yeah.
If from among the Christian flock they cannot call each other out, they are breaking a cardinal rule of their faith. They are not their brother's keeper. It's not complicated.
And that's the question I was asking. Is the church a sector? Is it a profession? Is it a business? Because I have said, and I'll repeat it, any sector of society that fails to self-regulate invites government regulation.
So maybe
that's how
CT,
it works.
So maybe CT is saying that at that time when KFCB called out this Good News International TV station, whatever it was, that the church should have actually picked up on that and said, you know what this fella is preaching here, there's a problem. And should have been able to say at that point,
call it out clearly.
As those who regulate morality in society today should have said, hello, what this guy is preaching is wrong. Is that what you're saying, CT?
Not am I saying that. Yeah. I said the same thing with regards to the role that the church, and this one I include other religious organization, has in calling out the government when they are not doing what they are supposed to do or when they are doing things which are wrong. And I said that when the church abrogates its duties, then all sorts of crazy things befall us because that responsibility is actually theirs. Yes, the moral police.
It is churches.
It's the religion.
All right.
The church is the custodian of the moral conscience
the issue,
of society.
What Pastor Mackenzie may have led these people to do now is on the extreme. All right.
Yes,
in terms of telling you to choose death and actually accelerate your own end of life.
Your own end of life.
But then there are very many other things that we are saying this is one Mackenzie. It's not like we have 7 Mackenzies who are telling people kill yourselves.
We don't know
more
yet,
than one.
Right? We don't even need a Mackenzie at all.
One is too many.
When we say regulate, when we say we need to have custodians of all this and the other, who's this and what are they using? I've got freedom of worship.
Yes, you do.
Right?
Yes.
And I worship as long as I am not leading to someone dying. I'm free to worship. And those are the dilemmas that came in. Remember, those are the dilemmas that even Professor Gedho Muigai was facing in terms of the pushback.
Exactly.
When he came with the proposal, let's regulate churches, what the churches told him is, look, if you head that direction, my friend, first of all, the Constitution says freedom. And number 2, what are you regulating? What is this SI unit that you're going to use? What are you going to use? Catholicism? That is one religion.
Exactly.
Are you going to use Protestant? That's another. Are you going to use Islam? If I want to come up with another one, a new one today, are you going to stop me? When Jesus came up with his different way of looking at worshipping the same God, but in a different way, those that were custodians then of the religion were the ones who actually took him to Pontius Pilate and said, this man, occultism, he was put on the cross.
Yes, he was.
His followers are the ones who led us where we are today, where we are the 4 of us here are professed Christians.
It's a very important point, Eric, you're bringing up. And this is the politics that come into play when you are taking action as a government official to better society. Because government policies should be rooted in research, deep thinking, discourse like this that involve researchers and academia. And people have committed their lives to just study phenomena and come up with guidelines that would help policymakers improve on their decisions.
I agree.
And I believe that's what Gedho Muigai was doing. But unfortunately, it came towards the elections. And I can tell you, there is no way a law like that will pass. For political expediency, the politicians say this is dangerous because the church has numbers and they can really frustrate and decide to vote this way, and they can push you into presidency, they can push you into becoming a member of parliament or whatever political position. Now, that's the question. When it becomes so individualistic that we don't look at the wider good, that we look at even political expediency and withdraw bills that are meant to serve posterity, is that the way we want to live our lives? Because I saw, in the city, you needed to interrogate this as a researcher, the president spoke very firmly yesterday.
Yes, president speaks very firmly about many things.
He likened Mackenzie's behavior to terrorism.
Yep.
And he said this is akin to terror, sin. There is no difference between Pastor Mackenzie and what a terrorist would do, because they're radicalized. And remember, this is something, that's the way we called it in 2018, radicalization. And if you look at the way terrorism works, preying on ignorance and promising things that you can't see, but somebody who purports to have deeper knowledge and understanding of God comes and tells you, if you die fighting for this cause, you'll have some 7 virgins in heaven, you'll run away from the problems of this world, and taking advantage of your ignorance, lack of education, and so on, you fall prey into such. And that's why I was saying the best way to save lives and to save our society and our communities and our people is to empower them with information. It's where the media comes in. And I was saying we dropped the ball, even ourselves, when we started
What information?
inviting comedians to become.
But
That's why I respect this show, because
Dr. Mutua,
there's a sense in which we have so many.
What information? What information do you think any of these
research,
people, many of the
like
people,
investigative journalism would have saved this?
many of the people who have
Has anybody run an expose?
Hold on. Many of the people who went to this are exposed, fairly exposed. Many of the times when stories, all right?
Yeah.
Remember, John Allan Namu and Jichopevu did a story on churches. NTV has also run stories on churches. Speak to those pastors.
I agree with you, Eric. We are together. I'm a journalist.
When those exposés are aired, the following day, that church is full. The following Sunday, that church is actually full. He gets more people.
Yeah, but
And
I wish we had an investigative journalist.
You're saying that I'm asking people to send 310 shillings and I offer miracles. People are coming. People are curious. People want to know.
It's
people
true,
want
Eric.
to follow.
It's true,
and
Eric.
what I am doing
why
is
are you
I'm
discounting
preaching the
this
word of the
important
Lord.
point, Eric? That a journalist all these years, somebody should have gone into Shakahola and stick there. This is the journalism that I knew. Eric, you've come from this field. We have been together. I know you. And I tend to think also in terms of resources to support investigative journalism. We are very shallow journalism. I don't want you to run away from that, because it is a self-criticism. I'm a journalist.
Self-reflection.
This is where I've been. I did 9 years with The Nation. My work has been within journalism and media. Even what I do, even when I go to the government as Director of Information and all these things. So I'm not really attacking journalists, and I was actually Secretary General of Kenya Union of Journalists, if you remember.
Yes.
And I did. You remember the first green booklet, Code of Ethics, and the first media council was self-regulating. I did all that. And when now the then Minister for Information, Raphael Tuju, attacked me with it and said, this thing of yours has no legal teeth. You summon journalists. If they don't come, what do you do? I got agencies to support the efforts to come up with a law for the Media Council. And now you can see what Media Council is doing. So these small efforts help. But Eric, and I'm bringing this to you because I know you and your professionalism, and we have worked together. A journalist like Jichopevu, and I'm so worried that we don't have now that caliber anymore, who can go spend time in the bush and expose this. How come no one, and I don't remember any story, that exposed this in the manner in which now it is happening? Where was the media? Because the media is supposed to invest in investigative journalism, give resources to journalists to do that, so that we don't just jump into what seems easy, just pandering into people's emotions and now this celebrity culture and filling our pages. I'm seeing the jokes that we are making even now. I saw during the Easter just the other day, a very solemn festivity. But what were we doing? Instead of interrogating the faith and questioning these things, we're bringing the jokes of Jesus, of Toderen, or whatever it is, and giving a lot of space and airtime to a non-issue like that during a very solemn festivity that I thought should have been the place to ask the question CT is asking, and where we can get answers. Whence does Christian faith go? Is it serving the purpose? Where are we? And use that moment. What were we doing? Shallow journalism. Jesus of Tonderen. We are giving that guy, I have a tremendous respect because he looks like an elder, but that's just a villager who is minding his own business and finding,
Actually, he's minding other people's business.
and enjoying the publicity you are giving him.
You see now,
and
where do you?
This is where these jokes
how do
now
you
end
draw
up
the
becoming very serious.
How do you distinguish between that one and the one whose crusades you attended? I'm sure because you were in that motorcade, you passed on the road that had been washed. How do you draw the line? How do you know that Prophet of War is not a villager, blah, 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 but Jesus of Tongaren is a villager?
But why don't we investigate and say there's something funny? Or say this is a true man of God? Because, look, this conversation should not be to incriminate anyone.
It was to raise the
I'm
awareness.
just saying, we have gone into jokes. Eric, we have gone into the jokes of socialites and celebrity culture and the cloud chasing.
Yeah.
And some of the things that we give prominence at the expense of investigative journalism on policy development communication really worry me.
Let's go into the news. After this, in the 9 o'clock hour, we'll open up the phone line so we can have a public conversation about this, what is happening to our society.